Hello. Hi, Pavan. How are you? Good evening.
That's
Nice to
right.
see
How are
you.
you?
So, how have you been, Pavan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear. Yes.
थोड़ा बहुत सीख गए, इतना करते हैं ये जूम पर, हर चीज जूम पे हो गई।
नहीं, ये तो काफी जो शोर मचा रखा है कि जूम ये नहीं करना चाहिए। ऐसे जब हमारे डिफेंस मिनिस्टर रोजाना बात करते हैं वो इतने सीनियर लोगों से, तो हमारे लिए तो इतना ज्यादा कुछ हमारे पास कोई सीक्रेट भी नहीं है।
हाँ, क्यों नहीं, जनरल डिस्कशन।
So, what is your next book, Pavan? कोई नई किताब आ रही है?
अभी मेरी द ग्रेटेस्ट ओड टू लॉर्ड राम अभी
Oh, I
निकली।
see. Okay.
That's in all the bookshops and is being promoted now mostly.
Hi, Ashok Sajjanar. I can see Seshadri Chari ji. It's okay. You are looking so different. I could not recognize you.
I know that is the whole problem. इसीलिए मैंने कहा let me introduce I am Chari.
You look like Nana. You look like
Chari.
Nana Deshmukh. You look like
Oh
Nana
God. So you know, Manish Tiwari told me that Chari, Seshadri Chari, BC was better.
Sonal ji, good
So he
evening.
said, what is
Sonal ji.
BC? Before Corona.
Sonal ji, good evening. Where is Sonal ji? I saw her. Then I think again she's Sonal ji. Where are you? I saw her. So once Sonal ji here, yes, she's here now.
But I can't see her.
I can see her, but her audio is still not working. Now her face is gone different. Yes, Sonal ji now is okay. Let me try to figure out for her.
मेरे को तो दिख नहीं रही।
Yes, Sonal ji, आपका लाल रंग का माइक्रोफोन है बॉटम, उसको आप दबा दी व्हाइट हो जाएगा। In the bottom you have right color माइक्रोफोन का टॉप होता उस तरह का, इसको आप दबा देंगे व्हाइट हो जाएगा तो आवाज आने लगेगी। हाय राजीव। नाउ सोनल जी का आवाज नहीं आ रहा अभी तक। बॉटम में रेड कलर का माइक लगा हुआ, उसको दबाइए आप व्हाइट हो जाएगा। In the bottom, yes. Now you can hear.
No.
Okay. All right.
Good evening. So hi Skanji, my neighbor is here. I think we can begin on dot. We have got our panel in place, so others will keep on joining as they are. Well, thank you all this evening. You have so many options to watch your television reality shows or dance performances or Indian Idol or watch any heated discussion. But we thought we will talk about our country, India. So, Sonalji, you know, in Ramcharitmanas, Tulsidas ji wrote, "Jaki rahi bhavana jaisi, prabhu murat dekhi tin taisi." We talk about India, something similar happens. For some, it is India of Vasudev Kutumbakam, Sarabdham Sambham. You have Shanti part, peace on earth, peace on heaven, peace on the skies. And we have Niskamkam of Gita. And we have so many other things. Other is that, look, Lord Buddha talked about non-violence 2,500 years before the UN was born. And this message was heard in South Korea, Japan, Thailand, China, Sri Lanka. And we have even the statue in Afghanistan before the Taliban brought it down. We have footprints of Indian culture, Borobudur, Indonesia, and you have Angkor Wat in Cambodia. So we have all this. And if you look around, when Jews were persecuted in Babylonia, 600 BC, they came to India. Today, Jews in India are only just 100. 100 Jews don't feel threatened, intimidated in 1.3 billion people in this country. Parsis came from Iran. Pavan will correct me. Parsis, I think they are less than 1 million in population, but their contribution to industry is roughly around 19%. We had a nun called Mother Teresa. She came from Albania. We honored her Bharat Ratna. And when she died, her body was carried to the same carriage on which was carried the body of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of nation. So doesn't it say a lot about India's long tradition of tolerance? By the time the Mughal Empire came to an end, India accounted for 25% of the global trade. But as Dr. Seshadri has brilliantly exposed in his book, An Era of Darkness, by the time British left in 1947, the share has come down to less than 2%. Regrettably, for the last 2-3 decades, we are struggling to be 1% of the global trade, and we are still not there. Honestly, if we use any parameter, whether it is life expectancy, literacy, infrastructure, colleges, universities, institutions, railroad, airport, defense production, India has made long stride. The country which was once called the begging bowl is now $3 trillion economy, and we aspire to a $5 trillion economy. The journey from bullock cart to Chandrayaan has been fascinating, and we have witnessed 3 revolutions: the green revolution, the white revolution, and the telecom revolution. Today, India has more than 1 billion cell phone owners, which is larger than the USA. But does it mean that everything has been hunky-dory? No, not really. The other side of the coin, we still have the largest number of poor, largest number of illiterate, largest number of undernourished persons live in this country. We have laws on the paper, but untouchability continues. Khap panchayat continue, honor killings happen there, child labor, bonded labor, infanticide, naval infanticide, Punjab, dowry deaths, flogging of some Dalits in some places. These things all happen. But this country has been birthplace of 4 major religions, but we still see from time to time some religious tension from here and there. We also see some kind of instances of mob lynching, which is not really good. But a country of 1.3 billion people, we pride to be the largest democracy in the world. And we have more than 600 voters who exercise their franchise peacefully year after year for last 70 plus years. So we can be proud of many things, but this is always a mixed picture. As Chinese henchman Deng Xiaoping would have said, if we take all the pluses and minuses, we will find the pluses are more than minus. That means we are on the right track, though we could have been doing better. Now, I won't take much time. I think we couldn't have had a better or more qualified panel for this evening. Dr. Sonal Mansingh need no introduction. She is arguably the greatest living Odissi Bharatanatyam dancer, exponent Bidusi as they call it. She is nominated member of Rajya Sabha. She has performed, I am told, more than 90 countries. During lockdown, she has been very active on Facebook Live and lecturing all kind of subjects. In her book, A Life Like No Other, has received rave reviews. She is known for speaking her mind, not mincing her words, and calling a spade. God save the person who crosses her path if she is in foul mood. What can I say about my friend Pavan Varma? He's a diplomat, he's an author, he's a writer, he's a columnist, commentator, and politician, all rolled in one. He has more than a dozen books to his credit. Many of his books have been translated to foreign languages. And his book, in his very eclectic taste, he can do just Mirza Ghalib to Adi Sankara to Kam Sutra. What a range he had. And his book, An Indian Middle Class and the Being Indian, are seminal books. I think losing him is perhaps the biggest loss Bihar CM Nitish Kumar has suffered. He shouldn't have let him go. Now we come to Professor Sunil Khilnani ji. Your book, An Idea of India, is an iconic book. your book of 50 incarnations. You have an international huge fan following. As a direct witness to the King's College London, you are doing great job. And I'm so grateful to you to be able to participate in the function. I can't boast. I have many friends in foreign service who would have come on board for the discussion if I told discussion will begin 7:30 in the morning. Professor or Dr. Seshadri Chari ji is an old friend. I have huge respect for him, and a former editor of Organizer. He's a freelance journalist now. He's a popular face on the Indian television. You can see him every day. He is a member of the committee of BJP. He has participated in our function about discussing India-China border last year, and you can see what is happening today. We are discussing the same subject. But one thing about him rare is that he's one of those few politicians with whom even the detractors can have a decent and civilized discussion, because he doesn't use his lungs power. He uses his strength of his argument. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will request Sonal ji. Sonal ji, you have no budget today. You have 10 minutes and you set the ball rolling. Tell us an overview in 10 minutes. What has happened so far, where we are going. You are the right person to show us the talisman. Thank you. Sonal ji.
Thank you. And hello to my co-panelists.
Hello.
I'll start from your last introductory sentence about me, something about my foul mood. I don't think that needs any introduction, because I don't suffer stupidity lightly. That's unfortunately or fortunately been my life, and I have lived the way I have lived all my life. So it's not about foul mood, it's about people who try to cross Lakshman Rekhas. And I don't easily allow that.
Okay, well taken.
All right. Having said that, thank you. Aham Brahmasmi. I love that. One of the ancient adage sutras, Aham Brahmasmi. I am that. And with capital T. All that you said about Sarva Dharma Samabhav and Ahimsa Paramo Dharma and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, etc., etc., etc. For me, the basic thing India stands for, that if I am a part of that Brahman, so is everything animate and inanimate also a part of that. And therefore what follows immediately is Tat Tvam Asi. You too, you are that. I am that and you are that. So Bharat Varsha or Jambu Dvipa, Aryavarta, stands for a variety of mind-boggling layers and layers and layers upon layers of existence, coexistence, non-existence, contra-existence, perceptions, beliefs, customs. I need not go into all that because I'm sure your learned and alert audience knows about that. My problem with speaking about India, let's go to India because it's in English now, is that am I going to speak about one homogenized country? Are we talking about homogeneity? It's very difficult to address anything relating to India today especially. So I said, which India shall I address? That which was Aryavarta, Bharatvarsha, Veda Vedanga, Asetu Himalaya, the yatras. People would transfer knowledge. People would go to one Gurukula, to another, to Nalanda, to Vikramshila, to Vallabhi. Great Kumara Jiva and hundreds of others carrying the granthas, the texts to China to be translated into Chinese and then on to Japan and others, as you mentioned. So one is the outward movement. You spoke about Bamiyan, which I had visited twice. And then the third time, I did not have the heart to go to Afghanistan because I said, I've seen enough. I've seen the beauty of Afghanistan as it was in 70, 71, 72. But the smile of the Bamiyan Buddha remains in my memory, etched in my memory. I talk about that because I straight away, again, quote you. You gave so many pros and cons, negatives and positives, as we usually do. We add up and we subtract, and this game goes on and on. I'm not interested in that game at all. I would like to bring us back. If you say ahimsa paramo dharma, much before Buddha, it was also enunciated by Sri Krishna. And if we say ahimsa paramo dharma, we forget to mention the concluding line. Dharma hinsa tathaivacha. To maintain my swadharma, and dharma not religion, we understand that. But dharma as the responsibilities, the duties that I have accepted to be mine towards my family, towards the society, towards my nation, towards my culture, towards my roots, whatever. So dharma hinsa, to maintain that dharma of mine. If somebody is trying to trample upon me, dharma hinsa tathaivacha, equally, tatha ivacha. Why we forget to mention that? So what I'm trying to say is that languages and cultures and beliefs and concepts, layers upon layers of civilizations, invasions, diametrically opposite belief systems, perceptions, and social order, political powers used for conversions in most historical periods, socio-cultural ethos, which grew in many directions. Fine, centuries. This is a very old, ancient country, and perhaps as we like to say, and rightly so, maybe the only living, vibrant civilization. Yeah, it's without exaggeration. So let's accept it. I was writing a little bit now because in the morning I was doing Annadan. I would like to now, I'll go back and forth zigzag quickly, that for us, dana, what you call philanthropy, and Christian philanthropy is very famous, but nobody talks about the unspoken, the quiet system of dana, Gupta Dan in India. There are so many such underground streams like the Saraswati River. The nice, the good things, the solid, concrete values, which we do not speak about. And I've always liked to insist upon the positives, upon the good things, and re-establish them, readdress them, reactivate them, rather than all the time say, oh, look at this, look at that. Yes. And then we go on to say, oh, but look at that majoritarian rule in that one-party dictatorship in our neighboring country. And yet we want to compare everything with them. And then we find ourselves so small and we say, oh, our growth rate is not the same, etc. ठीक है, मुझे इसमें कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं है, क्योंकि हमारी एक प्रवृत्ति बन गई है. Indians, unfortunately, love to indulge in self-flagellation, being apologetic. Oh my God, and I'm not one of them. So, for example, yoga. I just want to take a quick example because we talk of the past, we talk of the present, and we talk of the future now. Let's take one simple activity called yoga. It's not yoga, but it's yoga. Okay. Yoga is something that grew in the psyche, the consciousness, the subconscious, in the mind, and then it manifested itself through this physical body. The body being the transformative organ, the communication, the medium, let's say. And as a dancer, you know, I work with this, so I know that first you dance here in the heart, and then it flows through your body. Yoga. And of course, you know, yoga is now, we know that it's become worldwide. Even before Prime Minister Modi worked upon it to bring International Yoga Day, even before that, yoga had been taken abroad, and there are so many votaries, and there are breakfast yoga and power yoga and chaddi yoga and whatever yoga. But बस हो गया
Okay.
अभी exactly आधी मिनट बाकी है.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, for example, that where are the dharmic roots of yoga? When I say dharmic, people jump. Oh my God, she's talking of Hindutva. And I say, kya karun? How can I bang my head against this wall of prejudice called Hindutva? I don't understand the word Hindutva. I understand Sanatana, that which is perennial, which has come down in the human consciousness for a long time. So I just give that example that we want to develop, we are developed, we were developed, we are developing, we will develop, but not according to paradigms and models, samples, templates of others. We have to set our own templates. We have to set our own goalposts. And I don't think that we are much lacking in that. And culturally, we are, I think, wonderful. Only we don't know yet how to use it. I think Pavan can talk about it more. I can also talk about it, that unless we really understand, appreciate, and use consciously our culture, our cultural power, unless we do that, the trade, communication, IT, you put that in one pallu and you put culture in another, I think the culture will go down. Like the tulsi leaf, where all the golds and treasures of the kingdom and one tulsi leaf, it went down. The culture is that tulsi leaf. Thank you.
Thank you. Now over to Seshadri ji. The soft power or hard power, whichever power you want to use.
I didn't say hard power. I didn't say soft power, please. Not my words.
No, there are so many good examples, and we had absolutely wonderful peep into our past, as I should say. And I mean, I'm not that much of a learned person as far as Sanskrit is concerned. And very unfortunately, I'm more comfortable in English, unlike Mr. Pavan Varma, Ambassador Pavan Varma, who can be very fluent in English and Hindi also. But I just want to mention 2-3 points. The most important element that we have to discuss now is the very fact that we are not meeting in a hall and we are discussing through a webinar is the fact that we are passing through a very different crisis. It's a crisis time. Now, when we say crisis, we should understand the magnanimity of it. We should understand the greatness of this crisis. Problem of this crisis is never before has any crisis been as this kind of magnitude. We have faced 2 world wars, the World War I and the World War II. We know of the plague pandemic. We know of the Spain flu. We know of the economic fall of 2008, 2009, or whatever we say. And even within a country also, we have had so many problems, so many issues. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this, I think, is the only crisis which has forced the entire world to shut down. This is 90 days of shutdown in India, Many countries have had 15 days, 20 days, 1 month shutdown. This is the first time that not a single aircraft took off for nearly 60 days. Not a single ship sailed across any of the seas in the last 60 days. Not a single business establishment opened. And it's an unprecedented crisis if you look at it in a way. And you imagine a crisis which has affected all kinds of colors, the white, the black, the blue, the brown, the red, the green, everybody. Crisis has affected G20 countries, G7 countries, G6 countries, G2, Great One, number one country, number two country, agriculture economy, production economy, every kind of economy has been affected, every kind of country has been affected, every kind of dispensation from democracy to dictatorship, every kind of dispensation has been affected. Not a single country in the world has been out of this crisis. This is the magnitude of this crisis. And imagine one thing, this is, I mean, if you look at the other side of the crisis, it is it a war? Is it a world war? Actually, if you can look at the world war, you can say that world war started with this kind of thing and that kind of thing, and these people participated and all that. But this is one war in which the entire world is a victim. So in a way, this is the war. And look at the what you call the tools that this war is using. One coronavirus, of course it was called something else in the beginning, the Wuhan virus and all those things, but we will not go into those details. But imagine, if you talk in terms of science, the weight of the virus is calculated as 0.85 attograms. It is measured as 0.85 attograms. Now, in other words, it is 1/1,000,000th of a trillion gram. You take 1 trillion grams and divide it into million parts. 1/1,000,000th of a trillion grams is the weight of the virus. And if you look at one person who is affected because of coronavirus, it requires nearly 70 billion virus. 70 billion virus to affect one person. And imagine, more than 5 million people all over the world have been affected. 5 million people, and I think about 2 to 3 lakh people have died. 5 million people have been affected, and the total weight of the virus that has affected all the 5 million people is only 1 gram. 1 gram of virus, 1 gram of virus, which cannot be even seen by the naked eye, has closed the entire world for 90 days. This is the extent of a biological warfare, you call it, or this is the extent of the crisis that the world is facing. Now, if you look at the effect of the virus, effect of the crisis, this is one crisis which has practically challenged the world order. What was running from 1945 to 2020, in spite of the Cold War, in spite of so many other flashpoints all over the world order was intact. It was challenged at times, of course, but somehow or the other it stood. This is the first time we are talking about an emerging new world order. And in that emerging new world order, this crisis has challenged the core competencies of almost every country that matters. This is the extent of the crisis that we are facing. And the extent of crisis has affected respective countries on the basis of the systemic faults that those countries have. Now, I mean, although the crisis, the coronavirus started from...
आपके 2 मिनट और रह गए बस.
The coronavirus started from China, they say. Even China was not spared, it was affected. But the reason why China was affected was because of lack of transparency. The whistleblower who started all these things was silenced. The reason why America was affected was because of their excessive care and concern for liberty rather than individual health. And if you look at our own country, why India was affected? So many other reasons could be there: lack of civic sense, demography, lack of preparedness, lack of cooperation between the center and the state, and so many other things. Therefore, the lesson that we have to learn is we can talk about idea of India, it's one great, but all these idea of India, like every country in the world, can collapse, like the world order can collapse if we are not able to analyze the situation and be prepared for such an eventuality. In fact, I will leave this thought process with one sentence that Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay of the Bharatiya Janasangh said. The statement is in Hindi, I won't translate. He said, हमारा गौरवशाली अतीत है, गौरवशाली अतीत है, परंतु हम उसे विकास का परमोच्च बिंदु नहीं मानते हैं. हमारे सामने वर्तमान की चुनौतियां हैं, परंतु हम उन चुनौतियों से डरे नहीं. हमारे आंखों के सामने भविष्य के स्वर्णिम सपने हैं, परंतु हम निद्रालु नहीं, उन सपनों को साकार करने वाले जागृत कर्मयोगी हैं. So we have to remember, we cannot only relish the past, we cannot be cowed down by the present. We have a very bright future, but we have to work if you want to realize that bright future. Thank you.
Thank you, Seshadri ji. Over to my friend Pavan Varma. We have very bright future. We must steadfastly counter or address the crisis which we have. You have so many roles all rolled in one, so you can give a perspective which really is, I'm sure, appealing to everybody.
Thank you, Suren. I may not even take the 10 minutes that you have apportioned because I think there are speakers before. But I want to say one thing. You see, we may be a young nation, but we are an ancient civilization. And I think this factor needs to be always hyphenated to the notion of a modern republic. Otherwise, we will lose the moorings, the anchorage, the substratum of what Bharatvarsh actually is. It's very important in my view. We have a recorded history that goes back to about 5,000 years, and with the discovery of sites like Bhimbetka, etc., we go back almost 100,000 years. If you visit the caves of Bhimbetka near Bhopal, there are wonderful paintings on the caves which show creativity in its nascent emerging form 100,000 years ago as part of the foundational ethos of this civilization. But crises come to nations. Now it may be global. And I'm glad Seshadri Chari ji and before him Sonal ji, in a sense, married together the current crisis with a certain cultural background to the evolution of India. We have had crises before. The Harappan civilization, which, if I am not accused of being communal, can be called Sindhu Saraswati civilization. Today, balanced historians accept that label. Was, I think, by latest DNA findings and genetic evidence of a scientific caliber accepted by historians, was overwhelmed by a prolonged period of drought. A great civilization, larger than Mesopotamia, larger than Egypt. But from those ruins arose the continuity of Indian civilization. And let me say to you, this whole theory of the Aryan invasion, etc., it's all been debunked now. This is the crucible of civilization which has evolved with the interaction of creativity, the Aryans, the Harappans, and let me also say, Greece has gone, Egypt has gone, Mesopotamia has gone, the cradles of civilization. But those 4,000 years of history, starting from 3000 BCE, before the Common Era, up to 1000 CE, after the Common Era, it's a 4,000-year period. You can call it any name. There are historians who don't want to say the Hindu period, because why divide it on the basis of one religion? But it was largely, let's accept it, largely a period of great efflorescence, of great creativity, of great complexity, of great contribution, of the audacity of thought. That has been the foundation of this journey. And so we have come forward, and I believe, if you ask me, that the journey of the Republic has just begun. Okay, now quickly in the 2-3 minutes that I have, what is the balance sheet we draw? We are the world's largest democracy. But I think we have to fine-tune our democracy to prevent, if possible, some of the distortions which have crept into it, especially in the use of money and muscle power. This is something the Election Commission recognizes. We have to strive for it with an openness. As an economy, we've made great progress. The Prime Minister talks of a $5 trillion economy. But irrespective of pointing the finger at any one government, what has Seshadri Chari ji, the coronavirus crisis for the first time made visible? Millions of the urban poor living in the crevices of our city, eking out a living as part of an unorganized sector, in spite of the best efforts of the government, without a social safety security net. Now, obviously, they are not a creation of only the last 6 years. They are the product of a system that is a continuum through governments, whereby we have had inequity, institutionalized inequity, which we need to correct out of the same compassion, the daya, dan, paropkar, which we derive from our civilization. We have to correct that. So this is an aspect that India will have to face. And let me tell you, short-term solutions cannot be an answer. I hear debates, I participate on them in TV. Manrega, for instance, as a temporary reprieve, and I'd like Dr. Khilnani's understanding of this, as a temporary reprieve in a moment of acute crisis is understandable. But a dole in perpetuity where one person digs a hole and the other fills it up cannot be an answer to the systemic change that agriculture needs. That has been ignored for decades. And 60% of India's population still lives off the agricultural sector. Why has agriculture been growing for the last 45 years after the Green Revolution, 50 years, at 1% or 1.5% of growth? Where is the investment in the infrastructure of agriculture? Our agricultural productivity, even that of Punjab, is below that of Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand in the yield per hectare. Why is it? Where are the cold storage chains? Where are the roads? Where are the distribution networks? Where are the better seeds, the pesticides, the fertilizers? Only now, I must welcome that, do we have the APMC Act and the Essential Commodities Act been thrown into the dustbin. Structural reform is what agriculture needs. Why didn't we have it all this time? Thirdly, on the social aspect, I think there are two areas which we must deal with in the years ahead. One relates to ethics. By that I mean the pervasive corruption in society where we interpret an extremely evolved notion of right and wrong that was elaborated during our foundational years as a civilization of dharma to our convenience. Swadharma, Apadharma, Kula Dharma, Jati Dharma, and decide on what we think is right or wrong. But there must be in a republic some absolute standard of ethics which applies across society. And we have to go back again for inspiration to the same sources. So dharma, as Yudhishthir says in the Mahabharata, is sukshma, subtle. But then the Mahabharata and our great manuscripts and treatises also say there is an individual conscience about doing what is right. So that is about corruption. The second is, and this is something Sonalji spoke about, I mean, we have to get over the differences that we have created of an institutionalized and discriminatory nature. For instance, in my own, I'm a proud Hindu, in my society. And let me say, this is not new. Gandhiji spoke about it. Savarkar, we talk about that particular treatise that he wrote about Hindutva. But he gave a 7-point charter for social reform for Hindus, where you stop this discrimination, where you institutionalize exploitation of your own community. So there are things to do in the future. And lastly, let me say to you, I think, and this is something I think I want to also mention to Sunil Khilnani, you see, there is no idea of India where you cursorily take into account its civilizational aspect. I'm sorry. That era of history writing is over. Where if we talk of that past, somehow it is considered to be almost tantamount to being communal. You have to understand that there is an India which is a republic, but there is a Bharat which is a civilization, and the two are linked. And there is no idea of India for the future unless we can go back and examine and recognize and correct some of the erroneous perceptions or the neglect of that great civilization.
Okay, Pavan. Now, Professor Khilnani, you have all the voices you have heard, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kumar, for this opportunity, and thanks also to my co-panelists. Let me try and build on some of those remarks, but maybe also take them in a different direction. It seems to me that there are two aspects to the question. There's where we're heading in terms of our internal evolution, and where the global context is, and how do we figure out where we're heading there. And it seems to me from the global perspective, it's clear that we're in a period of greater risk and uncertainty than we've ever faced before. Unlike during the Cold War, when the global order was structured by bipolar and superpower rivalry, or in the 2 decades after the end of the Cold War, when the US dominated an era of rapid globalization, during which markets and democracy spread across the world, we're now in a much more unstructured and fluid world order. Older powers are declining, and even as new powers can't quite match their actual capacities with their aspirations. Meanwhile, the virtues of markets, of open markets and constitutional democracies are being challenged, and electorates and leaders across the world are pushing their countries back into nationalist stances, often in self-harming ways. So and I think we ourselves in India are vulnerably exposed to greater risks in the coming period. Now, rather than try to provide a panoramic balance sheet of successes and failures, or to bore you with my own fantasy of where we should be heading, or speculations about how we can get there, allow me to do something more fundamental. Let me identify what I think is the core risk which we face, and which ultimately may be the most significant in deciding our future possibilities. That we're fortunate enough at this stage in our history to possess, sorry, let me just go back a second. So, and I think this core risk is a risk to the greatest resource that India has built up for most of the 70 years since independence. And that resource is our legitimacy as a constitutional democracy. It's a powerful resource, but it's also a fragile resource, and it's one that can be very rapidly squandered and lost. That we're fortunate enough to possess it at all is the result of choices made by our founding generation. Through their constitutional commitment to principles, their ability to design institutions and practices, and above all, they're putting in place a national imagination which not merely recognized and respected internal diversity, but actually saw it as a positive strength. We emerged as a single nation at freedom, not as a result of some inevitable destiny or some special cultural glue. On the contrary, that we can speak of ourselves as a single nation today is only because of conscious choices and judgments made by thinking, acting human beings arrived at through a long process of deliberation and persuasion in the years leading up to independence and after, and of course also good luck. In my view, there was nothing naturally given or inevitable about us emerging as the nation we are today. No nation is natural, despite the legends that we might want to tell ourselves. What the founding generation established was unique, a democracy on the largest scale ever, based on the most deeply diverse human material anywhere in the world. If the scale was unique, so too has been the stability of India's democracy. Although it's weathered many crises, it still has more or less maintained the integrity of the state, and on the whole, it's seen peaceful alteration of elected power at both the national and state levels. In its workings, our democracy has had many flaws. In the electoral process, Dr. Varma just mentioned some, in the respect for the division of powers between the branches of government, and in the federal balance of central and state power, in the power of money, of corruption, in the protections of the rights of civil society and of the individual, and in encouraging an open society where free expression is truly valued. You all know this, and I imagine on much of this you would broadly agree. But something is now happening to the consensus story. The underlying norms, which had always stayed respected, if not always fulfilled, are, I think, now in question. And what has changed is this: the questioning and argumentative spirit, which has been such a characteristic of our own existence as a democratic society, and which indeed is the very essence of any real democracy, the life and blood and oxygen of an open society. Criticism, dissent, opposition, are now seen somehow as illegitimate. And this change in our political imagination, I would suggest, is the greatest risk we face for our future well-being. What do I mean by that? Why am I stressing this? Let me explain. Nations, especially democratic ones, are works in progress. And whether or not they advance forward depends to a very large extent on their capacities to learn. And that capacity to learn depends on the ability to think freely. By establishing India as a constitutional democracy, our founding fathers pledged themselves and us to a promise about the future. They committed us not to celebrating an imagined glorious past, but to the hard work of building a free, fair, and fearless future. And what is the most vital resource for building such a future? It's not a belief in an ideology which predicts the future utopia. Look at the wreckage of 20th century communism. It's not a faith in a religion or the embrace of a culture which envisages a future as little more than a consolation for injuries of the past. Look at Iran. It's not a belief in providence or in a great leader who will lead forward to destiny. Look at North Korea. Rather, the most important resource is the free intellect. More specifically, the future of any great democracy is intrinsically tied to its ability to understand its own present and past history, and the capacity to learn from such understanding. That is to say, a true, objective, self-critical understanding of ourselves. And that kind of knowledge is only possible to acquire in a society where the intellect and mind is entirely free to exercise its powers of reason and imagination. It's only possible, that is, in a democracy that values truth, facts, documents, no matter how awkward and uncomfortable they might be. Think about it. Authoritarian leaders and governments abhor scrutiny. They abjure fact-based history and journalism in favor of myths and cults of personality. And they wish to constrain free and open debate and dissent. They believe they already possess all the correct ideas and policies, and all that's required is to implement them. But that self-confidence, I'd suggest, is born of a lack of self-knowledge, and all too often it stumbles into failure. Just as the market has been the most effective mechanism that so far devised to discover the needs and to satisfy the needs of individuals, so too constitutional democracy is the best and most effective method we have evolved so far for effective collective human learning. By creating a political order based on the division of power across institutions, each of whose purpose was to check and monitor, democracy allows self-scrutiny and aspires to transparency so that we can see and understand and critique the workings of power, hold it accountable, and make sure that it delivers on the legitimate claims of all citizens, not only some privileged group. Let me remind you of something that one of the great Democrats of the 20th century said. The men who create power make an indispensable contribution to the nation's greatness, John F. Kennedy once said. But the men who question power make a contribution just as indispensable, especially when that questioning is disinterested, for they determine whether we use power or power uses us. So by securing the basic liberties of individual freedom, above all the unfettered right to think and express ourselves freely, societies make available to themselves the capacity for self-criticism, for analysis of the historical record of their performance. They can evaluate with greater objectivity their successes and failures and learn to do better. Amidst the fog of human action, they can develop a map showing where they are, how they got there, where they need to go next. Now, what I've said will have sounded abstract in the face of the urgencies of now, pandemic, economic downturn, political punchbagging. But I don't apologize for that, because as we become ever more mired in disagreements between preferred visions, as we let immediate alarm obscure deeper values at stake, we all too often, I think, forget the necessary preconditions for our political future. The preconditions that give us the cognitive tools, the intellectual resource to figure out where we need to head and how to get there. Institutions and practices of constitutional democracy.
Keep in mind.
I'm just winding up. Premised as they are on free inquiry and expression are not just nice ideals, mere ornaments that when they become a nuisance that gets in the way for more urgent imperatives can be dispensed with. They are essential as a method of collective self-knowledge and learning. They are the cognitive infrastructure, if you like, for our collective self-education. If we damage them, neglect them, dismantle them, we're putting ourselves into the wilderness of arbitrary, random manifestos and demagogues. Without them, we have no way of figuring out where we are or where we should be heading. We'll be fated to stumble blindly or to delude ourselves that a leader or an ideology can do our thinking for us. And no democracy can let anyone else do their thinking for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you all. Now I'm left with about 6 minutes. I will request each one of you 1 minute, tell us where do you see India in 10 years? After 10 years, with all the factors taken into account, where do you see India? Sonalji, 1 minute.
Well, if I say that I see a brilliant future for India, I won't say Vishwa Guru, it's a huge term, but I dare say that India will stand as a shining example for the world. And I think countries would love to make friends and follow certain of the wonderful things that India will have to offer.
Okay, Pavan, what about you? Same question. Where do you see India in 10 years?
I think my internet has. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think that, you see, we should not be possessed by self-doubt. India is a great country, and I don't believe the British created the Indian nation. By the way, I don't think that the theory that we became a nation evolving from a civilization was not an inevitability, and only the coming of the British melded us into one nation. This is a great nation with a great history. And 73 years is a very short period. So 10 years from now, what do I see? We must be in a position to pursue what is the destiny of India, taking the right course of action at the right time for course correction where required. And that is the key to the future of India in terms
Okay.
of democracy and equality. And I must say, a culture.
Seshadri ji, 1 minute. Where do you see India in
Yeah.
10 years?
Obviously, I agree with all our speakers that we have a very, very great and bright future, no doubt about it. And we should not doubt our own capabilities and capacities. But we have competency also. But what is more important is that we will have to make a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? We need not hide our weaknesses and we need not gloat on our strength. So we have to improve our strength, but at the same time, we have to accept. If we have a weakness, let us accept it. Let us discuss it, let us debate it, and let us correct all those weaknesses. And a SWOT analysis will exactly tell us where we are and how to reach where we have to go.
Professor Khilnani, take into account all the strength and weakness of India. Where do you see India in 10 years?
Well, I would never ask a political scientist to predict the future, so I'm not going to go there. But I very much share what Dr. Chari has just said. I think we certainly owe ourselves a great future, but it's not going to happen inevitably. It's not going to happen by us merely celebrating ourselves in our past. It's going to happen by, I think, self-criticism, self-doubt, and by constantly allowing the free play of our minds and argument. It's because we've been such a society full of creativity and independent argument, I think, that we've got to where we are. And to try and move away from that or suggest that that should be channeled in certain ways seems to me that we're doing ourselves damage. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful the fact that we're mainly a young society, and their ideas are ideas that we can't even dream about. So I think that's where our hope lies.
Okay, Pavan, you are raising your finger. You want to say something?
I just want to say to my good friend Dr. Khilnani, Sunil, that there is no contradiction between celebrating the legitimate achievements of the past and being objectively self-critical today. They should not be seen in opposition.
No, there's no contradiction, but what is important is that we actually historically understand what that past is.
Yes. In fact, that is the course correction we need.
Because you talk about
Yes.
the corruption of money power. I think the greatest corruption actually is the corruption of truth, the corruption of historical truth, the corruption of truth about the present day world. That's the corruption we should be most worried about.
Intellectual dishonesty.
Hello.
Sonal ji, want to add?
I know. I just want to concur with Pavan that course correction of history. That is very much the demand of the day. We should do that. I agree with you.
Course correction is something which we can do in our own lives also and day-to-day life also. Anyway, we must celebrate
that. All we are doing, Surendraji, we are doing.
And we must celebrate technology. What for technology? Can you think? We are sitting in 4 different places and some different time zones and talking about something without all. And this coronavirus has at least forced us to try these new things. That's why we're sitting in maybe in Nehru Memorial Museum or maybe in
But
Thank you very much.
Ambassador,
Thank you all. You have been
Ambassador
very-
Surendra,
Thank you. Thank you.
but the only thing we are missing is the cup of tea which you offered.
You can let me request all our attendees that please give a virtual round applause to our panelists who have taken effort to join us on Sunday evening or Sunday morning.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All
Thank
the
you very
best.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honored to have you all here. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.